that sound horrible? Well, it wasn't all horrible, but it was kind of like this. Like that icky room downstairs in this building that where you have gazillions of people out there in the audience, right? Like that. I entered my chemistry class first day at the University of Maryland, and it was an honors chemistry class that I had to be invited to, right? So don't ask me how a little kid from Greencastle, Pennsylvania got invited to honors chemistry, but nonetheless I walked in the room, and the person up front said, "Ha, what are you doing here?" Chem 3H, right? "Look around, did you see any women?" That's what he said. And I'm like, oh my God, where have I come? Someone sat down, kind of in the back, which is not over. And he really next said, "Look to your left, look to your left, look to your right. Those two people won't be here after the first exam." I'm like, whoa. So usually I'm a fighter, oldest of 11, I'm a fighter, right? I threw my hand up in the air and he went, "What do you want?" And I went, "Where the hell's drop at?" I joined regular chemistry, a good choice. Right? I had another guy in comparative anatomy who in his first lecture said, "Nobody will ever get more than a 70% on any of my exams because you can't possibly learn 70% of what I'm going to tell you." I went, whoa. He was right. I mean, but of course he was right because he gave us 12 essay questions to answer in 50 minutes for his exam, so there's no way you were going to get a 70 because you couldn't write that fast. But so, and then I had these people that kept saying, "So you want to be a doctor? Don't you really need a nurse? How many women do you think get into medical school anyway?" Well, it was true at the time there were caps in U.S. medical schools on women at no more than 7% of the entering class. That's no longer true. Women are almost outnumbering men these days, but then this is the kind of thing that happened, right? So hindsight 2020 says I became the person I am today because of bad examples, as well as good mentors and good people along the way. So kind of like early on, maybe deep in my heart, I went, the best revenge is not to be like them. Do something different. But I also tried out bunches of other things. So for you all who are interested in medicine, I'm going to urge you to get real clinical experience, right? Because part of what turned me away from medicine and into research was my experiences in clinics. And part of it was because medicine wasn't all that useful in the 60s to some audiences, right? So I said I wanted to be a pediatric cardiologist. If you look on my high school yearbook page, it says I'm going to be at NIH leading, cardiac pediatrics all over the place, right? That's what I thought in high school. But when I was an undergrad, I spent a full summer volunteering in a pediatric clinic, in the oncology clinic. And what I discovered was at that point in time, most of the babies that were born prematurely or small or with heart disease died. Medicine didn't know what to do with them. And I kept asking questions like, well, why can't we figure this out? What causes these illnesses, etc.? So those questions are science questions, not medicine questions. Really. So I started to get interested in how can we find out? What are the questions that will help us answer this? What experiments can we do to figure out how to fix these things? But I also didn't like going home every day and crying over dead babies. I found myself going, this is really draining. Right? It wasn't exciting as I thought it would be. I thought I would be helping people, and I found like I was crying a lot. Right? And people said, well, you'll harden up. Well, and pretty soon that won't bother you. And I went, I don't want to be that kind of doctor. I want to be a medical doctor. I want to be a Dr. Welby kind of doctor. Right? Does anybody remember that? It's maybe first time. Not a Dr. House kind of doctor. You do remember House, right? Yeah. Well, Dr. Welby was a TV figure, a fatherly doctor that actually went out and made house calls and actually visited his patients. It's kind of doctor, right? That cared about every single person that was under their care. I remember when the heart got hard and this won't bother you anymore, right? So I kept going like, I don't think I can do that. So I said, well, maybe I'll try psychiatry. Surely you can help people with mental illness and depression and other kinds of things. So I volunteered for 3 months in St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C., which is kind of like Bedlam, if you read anything, any historical stories about mental hospitals in the 1800s, 1900s. Whew. So it turns out that at that time, mostly what they did with people that were mentally ill was lock them up and give them meds to keep them quiet. We've learned a lot more since then. But we've learned a lot of that by asking questions. That's research, right? That's about other kinds of things. So I was skipping along, and I started reading things about why people leave science careers and stuff early on. Why do people think about moving out of science into something else? And I look back and I think, gosh, maybe these things were shaping me even then. That poor teaching and this focus on memorization and really dull stuff and not asking questions, and maybe that was why I should think about something else. But I also did some other stuff. So I've got cows in here too. I have alligators, fruit flies, people, cows. When I was a junior in college, right after my junior year, I got married. I don't recommend that either. Little pathways that kind of take you off in some strange directions. But so I got back from my senior year, and the financial aid office said, well, you're no longer eligible for your scholarship. What? The first day of school, they tell me this, right? Schools need fixing too. And I said, why? And they said, well, you married a guy that's from Maryland, and your scholarship is from the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency, so you're no longer a Pennsylvania resident. So we're not giving you your scholarship. So I went like, oops. So I went to work for a year, and I finished my last year working 30 hours a week. And I worked at the Beef Cattle Nutrition Branch of the USDA, which is very close to the University of Maryland, so you can get there. And the question that we were working on in this research lab was whether you could feed beef cattle ground up newspaper, an assortment of vitamins, and still have all of their microorganisms that help them digest their food live, right? So they were going to use beef cattle to recycle newspaper. Interesting question, right? I learned more microbiology in that year of work than I did in 4 years of undergraduate education. So because we were growing all the microbes that grow in the cows' stomachs, and then feeding them different things to see how you could get all their microbes to survive. So cows, in case you don't know it, have a 5-part stomach. And those parts have different microorganism populations in them. And without the microorganisms that grow in their stomachs, they can't break down cellulose, like grass is mostly cellulose. Right? Newspaper is also mostly cellulose, right? So we had this really interesting hypothesis. So we were growing this in vivo in the lab. We were having artificial cow stomachs, if you will, glass cow stomachs where we were growing these things. But we also had cows like this with fistulas, little glass doors in their side, where you could reach in and sample their stomach, whatever was in their stomach at the time, and the microorganisms in there. Right? It was fun. Yeah, it looked like it was fun. It was fun, and it was interesting, and it was asking this really cool question that if it would have worked all the way, we'd have a really cool recycling plant walking around, and then we could eat it when it's done, right? All kinds of cool things. So I worked with chemicals for that year. And that was an exciting thing that got me moving on and thinking about research careers. Right? So, but like I said, sometimes life gives you lemons, right? My husband got drafted, it was 1969, I guess. Got drafted in the Vietnam War. And so plans changed. You know, we were both going to go on to graduate school out of undergrad school. Uncle Sam didn't let that happen. So he was drafted and eventually sent to the Fort Gordon in near Augusta, Georgia. And so I went to work at the Medical College of Georgia. And it kind of united my medical interests plus some research interests. So I was working in a biochemistry lab. You can learn things on the fly. You don't always have to have classes, right? But in this biochemistry lab, we were working with the very first discoveries around what causes mental retardation, what are the genetic conditions behind mental retardation, how can you test for it. And we actually found out some of the earliest 5 or 6 really serious causes of mental retardation in children. Right? And so we were doing, I was mostly doing the lab work, but we also had our collection of samples from the kids at Georgia Hospital for, so at that point in time, what we did with kids that were mentally retarded for the most part was warehouse them in big state facilities. So there were children of families, some families had 8 kids in the mental hospital. Some, because they kept having children, trying to have one that wasn't affected. Major genetic conditions. So this would be like things like, at that time, Down syndrome, completely untreatable. Phenylketonuria, which we can test for very easily and prevent all the bad effects from today, completely untreatable. Nobody knew what caused it, right? We did the work on the proteins and the biochemistry of metabolism that helped to set the stage for that field. Right? So sometimes life gives you lemons. Make lemonade. Find some place you can make a difference, right? Then after that, I spent a few years at Savannah River Ecology Lab because my husband was working there on a master's thesis in wildlife biology. And that's when I started working with alligators and snakes and all kinds of stuff like that. It was not that, I was never afraid of them as a kid because, you know, we lived out in the country. We had lots of critters around. But what kinds of questions why would Savannah River Ecology Lab, where is that? Who knows? No, it's not Savannah, Georgia. It's near Aiken, South Carolina.